Hey everybody, Mighty Matt D here. You might know me from the Atari 5200 Super Community podcast that I do with Willie, but today I'm going to talk to you about the Basic Engine single board computer. It's this little guy right here. Now what this is, if you look up basicengine.org online, you'll see that it's the plans and the open source software for a very simple computer that runs basic type programs and has a bunch of, it makes it easy to write games basically in BASIC. Now, just to go back a little bit in case you're not really familiar with BASIC, if you're an old fart like me or Willie and you had a computer in the early 80s, you know they're quite a bit different than they are now. Home computers back then, they just came with basically a cartridge port, and they had a keyboard on them, joystick ports, and they all pretty much had some version of BASIC, which BASIC is just a computer language. It stands for, BASIC is an acronym that stands for Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. So if you got a computer back then, you probably learned how to program in BASIC at least a little bit, because they all came with something like this. This is the one we got with our Radio Shack color computer. You can see it's like very friendly looking. It's got cartoons, lots of big pictures. It spells everything out very plainly. They wanted to make computers approachable primarily to kids. A lot of parents bought them hoping their kids would learn about computers because they knew that was where the future was. So anyway, nowadays, you don't really most people don't program computers unless they're particularly interested in that kind of thing. It's something you can get, but it's not a default thing that you do with everybody does with their computer. So this, I think, sort of brings you back to that day when you'd power it on and you'd be greeted with an OK prompt and you started to type in commands. Now, this was supplied to us by Produkt, and what they do is the plans for these boards and the software for these boards is all available online free of charge at basicengine.org. But if you're not really into soldering, you don't want to mess with all that and program, getting the chips set up for you, you can just order this pre-made and it'll have everything with it. He throws a micro SD card in there as well, and you can just plug it in and it's ready to go. Alright, so here it is, up close. This is the whole thing. It's just one board, like you can see, very similar to a Raspberry Pi. I think it even has it might even have the same hole mounting pattern. I don't have a case available for Raspberry Pi, an extra one, so I couldn't try that out. But the booklet I've read on it said that's what it fits. So on the back here, you're just going to see this little port right here. This is for the micro SD card. It just pops out just like they normally would. And that is going to contain your firmware and all the programs that you write and decide to save to it. Okay. On the other side, we've got all the ports that you can hook things up to it with. This right here is a PlayStation controller port. It takes all of the wired controllers from PlayStation 1 and 2. Both the DualShock and the regular one will work in there. Although I don't think it supports the analog sticks on the DualShock. I think it just uses the direction pad. I'm not for sure on that, but I couldn't get the analog sticks to do anything on the sample programs that I tried. Up here at the top, it's hard to see, but this port right here is Gpio header pins. If you have a Raspberry Pi, you might be familiar with those already. You can connect, basically you can program it to like look for sensors or other things that you hook up to these. If you're into electronics hobbyist stuff, then you'll have a good idea of what to do with those. And if not, you don't have to use them. There's also a reset button up here. Just clicky clicky, that'll reboot the system. Over here, got 3 ports, video output, audio output. You'll notice that that's the only video and audio output you have. There is no HDMI port on these. It wasn't designed with that. So that's, I don't know, I would have liked to have seen an HDMI port on that. I think that would have helped people out a little bit and would have provided a nice clear picture, but this is kind of neat too. Yeah, I'll show you later, but it supports most of the video modes it has are very similar to what you would see on old video game consoles or computers, so it makes it very easy to make it look, your programs look exactly like they're playing on one of those consoles. It's kind of cool. So I'll hook it up to a CRT TV. But I know a lot of newer TVs don't even have these ports on them anymore, so just make sure you've got some way to connect that stuff to your TV. This other port here is for the keyboard. This is an older port as well. It's a PS2 keyboard port. This is kind of what they used before everything went to USB. So I happen to have one laying around, so that's what I'm going to use. If you don't have one of those, there is a USB port on the device as well. But according to the guy who created the basic engine, it only works with about half of USB keyboards. So basically, it works with USB keyboards that also speak PS2, is what he says. I have a Dell USB keyboard. It's the only one that I have that's USB, and it did not work with that, but your mileage may vary. And finally, we've got this little port right here. This is a micro USB port. That's where it gets its power. That's also the same as what a Raspberry Pi has. If you have an old phone charger laying around or that type of thing, it'll work just fine. It doesn't have any real special power requirements. All right, so let's hook this up and see what it's about. Okay, so we've got it all set up here. You'll see at the top right, you've got the basic engine logo. It looks an awful lot like the PC engine logo, the Japanese gaming system. And at the very top, you'll see, is that your final answer? That's just one of many funny messages that it can put up there. I've probably started the thing 30 times. I've never seen the same message twice. In fact, I'll reset it and I'll show you that it always comes up with a different one. Idiot proof. Yeah, I beg to differ. I'm pretty sure you can mess this up. Anyway, so it also shows you the amount of memory free. It looks like about 64 kilobytes, which is what an old computer would have topped out at, and which directory you're in, and the version of BASIC, the version of the firmware, which is over there on the right-hand side. So we'll just see what files are in there by typing in the files command. It's sort of the same as the MS-DOS dir command, if that means anything to you. And it shows you what's on the memory card. Some of these things like that 1mgm.sf2, that's probably the firmware or something, so you don't need to mess with that. But anything with an asterisk next to it is a directory. You can switch directories around. So let's run a few programs and see what this thing can do. We'll start out with a quick one that I wrote. Most of these that I'll show you came with the basic engine already on the memory card as little demo things and what have you. But this one I just wrote real quick just to kind of get my feet wet on programming it and to kind of show a couple things that it can do. So let's just go to that directory. It's called test game. See what's in there. Here's a few programs I wrote. The only one that I'll show you is test. So we'll load that one up first. The list will show you the contents of the program. You see it's very short. I'm going to just run it. Alright, so I want to start what my name is. You see it says it out, so it has a built-in speech synthesizer. I think that's really neat. That was something that would have been an extra cost option back in the day for sure, and it wasn't something that every computer could do. And it just tickles me that it's nothing for them to include it now on one of these, even on a single board computer like this. And it's easily accessible. The command to use it is literally just say, and then you put whatever you want it to say in there. It couldn't be easier. And this is the music capabilities. It's sort of like a MIDI type thing. There's a certain type of commands or song type that it can play, and you can find a lot of information about that online if you dig a little deeper. It's basically just MIDI type controls. It can emulate a bunch of different instruments and what have you, and multiple sound channels. It's pretty cool. And then I'll just have a little quick graphics sequence here. And it's just, all it's doing now is it's filling in colored rectangles as quickly as it can. So this sort of gives you an idea of the computer's speed. If you're asking it to do this type of thing manually, I mean, you could certainly squeeze a lot more out of it graphics wise if you knew what you're doing, but this is just a very quick simple loop to just draw concentric rectangles. It isn't anything. This is, although it's much faster than my old TRS-80 color computer would have been, it's obviously something you do have to be aware of. The thing isn't so blindingly fast. Like, you couldn't just maybe my laptop probably could have done that and just filled up the screen. It would have been over in the blink of an eye, and it took this several seconds to go through that. So it just kind of gives you an idea of the speed of the thing. And just to show you as well, how to how easily it is to mess things up in your programming. I'll run the same program again, but this time I'm not going to like give it time in between things, because the sound channels can kind of overwrite each other and what have you. So if I just type in my name again, and then just jump to the next thing, you'll see it didn't even play the Thunderstruck song because it wasn't done saying the speech synthesis part. So it's easy to trip itself up. It's just something as a programmer you'd have to be careful of, and you'd have to figure out the intricacies of it, and I didn't take the time to do that, obviously, but it just gives you an idea, and something that programmers have to deal with. So at any rate, we will move on to the next thing. Let's go back to the home directory. If I could type. You see, they included a Space Invaders clone, Tetris clone, and a shoot 'em up type thing, and a Sako Band game, which is like a puzzle game. I'll show you a few of those. Why don't we start with Tetris? That's something everybody knows and is familiar with. I think that this turned out really nice, considering it was just a demo that somebody did. So, looking at the Tetris folder, you can see it's just a basic program, just like mine. It clocks in a little over 7 kilobytes for a whole Tetris game. I think that's also pretty impressive. Boom, there it is. You can see the controls are on the side. This is a keyboard controlled game. And it controls and plays just like Tetris would. There's no sound in it, I don't think, but this is a pretty impressive little game. And you know, somebody just wrote this in BASIC directly on this computer. I think that's a lot of fun, and it kind of gives you a good idea of what you can do, even in even just a little bit of code. You know, there's room for quite a bit more, obviously. So that's pretty cool, I think. So just break out of that. Get to the bottom here. What else can we do? Let's see. Go back to the home directory again. Clear the screen. And let's try the Space Invaders one. Just give you an idea of that. Now you'll see in this directory there's some .pcx files. Those are graphics files, and you can use those. You can either create those on your desktop computer or what have you, and bring them in on the memory card, or there are provisions to create graphics screens like that right here on the basic engine itself. And but you can use those as assets in the game, so you're not having to manually draw everything on the screen. You can just have it pull in a graphics tile or a sprite data or a background data, that sort of thing, and it'll utilize that. So let's load up a program. That's going to be the Space Invaders.bas. Again, a little under 7 kilobytes. And run it. And you'll see they use that PCX file to sort of create that title screen. Now, it's not obviously a great version of Space Invaders, but it kind of gives you an idea of what the thing can do. It's moving a lot of objects on the screen. It has collision detection built into it, and that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of neat. Little game over sequence. Not too shabby, you know. We'll break out of that one. Clear out the screen. Clear out the memory. This really brings me back to using my old color computer. Like, a lot of the commands are the same. I mean, BASIC varied from computer to computer based on what each manufacturer wanted to customize, but is pretty similar across the board. It's amazing how much of it I still remember. I spent a lot of time when I was a little kid writing basic programs. I mean, I don't think any of them were all that great, but it was fun to do anyway. So, let's see, we did Space Invaders, we did Tetris. Oh, well, I'll show you the shoot 'em up thing. This is pretty neat. It's not really a game, it's just a tech demo, if you will. Kind of shows the sprite handling capabilities of the thing. So let's, of the basic engine, so let's go check that out. I think it's shmup. Yeah, the shmup directory. And I'll show you the files in there. You can see it's got, those are all like the graphics, the sprites in the background, and then the program itself, which will load up. Again, the program itself, less than 5 kilobytes. Whoops. You have to be real specific about typing things in. It's not going to guess what you mean. You have to type in the file name exactly, or it won't know what you want. And there it is. This one uses the PlayStation controller, so you can see it reads controller inputs just fine. And I think this looks a lot like a PC Engine game or a TurboGrafx 16 game would generally look like, as far as like the resolution, the color depth. I think that's kind of cool. You could very easily create a game that looks like an old 8-bit game without too much trouble. It has the capabilities for that sort of built right into it. You can see it has little walk animation for the guy, and collision detection, and all that. High scores up there at the top. Pretty neat. I mean, not much to it, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what it can do. And I'll show you this that I noticed. So now I'm back in the text screen, and I'm typing commands in, but the text is only going to take up that bottom 4 or 5 lines. That's because it has window capabilities where it can just block off portions of the screen for certain things. Like you have one part that's just for the graphics in your game, another part that's just for text, and it'll manage that for you. And I think that's really cool. That's something our old computers definitely could not do, not through BASIC at least. So kind of a neat thing. Oh, wanted a number there. So let's put one in there. All right. One last thing I want to show you guys that I think is super cool is, if you ever played old school text adventures back in the day, I'm thinking like Zork or Colossal Cave Adventure, or geez, there was a bunch of them. A company called Infocom made a lot of text adventure games, and they made them for a lot of different computers, the Commodore 64 and the Apple and all those. And what they did was, they, rather than rewriting each game for every single computer they wanted to put it out for, they wrote something called an engine. And it was an engine called, they called it the Z code engine. And it would sort of like, was like a text interpreter. And it would handle things that were necessary for text adventure games, so they could just focus on writing the Z code for the game itself. And they wrote one engine for each computer that was on the market that they wanted to publish for. And then they could just, once they had all those done, they could just focus on writing the Z code for each game. So once they wrote a Z code for the game, it would work on every computer that they had an engine for. Well, this has a Z code engine on it, built into it. And it even comes with like the Z code for Zork 1 is on here, but there's Z code for tons of games online. Like I looked, like there's just scads of them. Some of them people wrote themselves, and some of them that are original ones from the 80s that were published and sold, like the Zork series and other games that Infocom put out. I think that's really neat. I don't know the first thing about writing Z code, but if that's something you're into, you know, you could certainly do that. The command to run them is kind of odd. It's this X, Y, Z, Z, Y. I don't know. I think that has some significance maybe in the Infocom world or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's how you load up these Z codes. So right here I have Zork 1, and boom, it just starts Zork, which I think that's so cool. Like there's like I said, there's tons and tons of these out there, and I remember playing them, and I remember writing them in BASIC, which is how we would have done it. But I don't know what the Z code engine is capable of. I'd have to dig a little more into that, but there's a lot of games you could just play right out of the box with this anyways. So if you're not familiar with text adventures, it's an adventure game where you type in commands of what you want to do, which direction you want to go to. It describes what you see around you. You can usually pick things up, look at things more closely. It's sort of like an interactive novel. They called it interactive fiction. Very cool idea. It was a way to get people into sort of these expansive game worlds on computers that had very limited graphics and memory capabilities. So like right here, it just describes them staying in front of a house. The door is boarded up. There's a small mailbox here, so I might open the mailbox. All right, you open it up. Oh, there's a leaflet inside, so you take the leaflet. Taken. Now I have to, let's read the leaflet. So you see, and if you tell it to something it doesn't know what to do, it'll ask you more questions. You have to be more specific. Most of the things are 2-word instructions, but it's surprisingly capable of understanding a pretty large vocabulary. Pretty neat stuff. So that's Zork. Okay, so what's the verdict on this little guy? I think it's pretty cool. I think Produkt did a good job making this. It's a sturdy little board. It's built well. I think it's a lot of fun to play around with. You're going to want to do your research on it to see if this is something that you'd be interested in doing and messing around with, because this is a hobbyist thing. This isn't something you're going to buy if you just want to play games, but if you're interested in making them, learning how to program, or maybe getting a better idea of how computers work on a fundamental level, this is a neat thing to play with. I had a good time with it. I enjoyed it. Like I said, basicengine.org. Check it out. See what the website's all about and see what basic programming is all about. Maybe give it a try. Thanks for watching.